Good evening, Ohr Savoy. It's a great honor to have the Chief Rabbi here, particularly in light of the fact that he has brought up a wonderful book on Shabbos. And please God, we'd like to start learning it together. It's a very, very well-researched and well-written sefer. And it's a tremendous, tremendous schus. So without further ado, the Chief Rabbi, please address us.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Landau, for such generous words of introduction. It's so lovely to be here, and this shul is indeed blessed to have the Rabbi and Rebbitzin at the helm. It goes to the compassion and the care with which he treats each and every single member of this congregation. Ohr Savoy is such an important shul in Johannesburg, Jewry, for so many different reasons. So long may that continue. Mechayil el chayil, from strength to strength. We're thinking about Pesach. The first word that comes to mind when you're thinking about Pesach is freedom. That's in fact how it is described in the Machzor, Zman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom. But I know since this is a woman's shir, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, is this really the time of freedom or not? Or is this the time of labor? And I think actually in that dilemma of Pesach, that very dilemma, is it freedom or is it work? Is it duty or is there a sense of liberation? In that tension is a very important fundamental truth about life and about human nature and about the very essence of what freedom is. But before we get into that, let's take a moment to reflect on the basic gift of what liberation and freedom is about. And it's important to do so because the word freedom has many different meanings. At its most basic level, we're talking about political and legal freedom. And political and legal freedom means living in a democracy. It means having your rights protected. It means that nobody can tell you what to do and how to run your life. You are indeed a free agent. And that is exactly what the Jewish people were not in Egypt. We were under the authority of Pharaoh and the police state that it was. And what we celebrate on Pesach is the very basic beginning of freedom, where no one could tell us what to do. In fact, the Sforno says the very definition of freedom is that you are a master of your own time, that you can decide how you allocate your time. That goes to the very heart. That's why the Sforno explains that one of the very first mitzvahs the Jewish people gave as a sign of freedom was the calendar and the determination of time, that we were now masters of our own time. That's why that mitzvah was given even before the rest of the Torah was given, as a symbol of freedom. The heart of freedom, and why it's so important as South African citizens to reflect on what that means, because we have lots of challenges in this country, and there's so many factors and problems and issues that we face, but we also have to acknowledge the blessings that it comes with. And one of the most important blessings, which we did not have and nobody had in the apartheid years, and this is the very essence of what gives hope for the future, is the fact that we live in a free democracy. And a free democracy means that you have freedom of expression, freedom of association, you can challenge the government, there is civil society, there are regular elections, there is an independent judiciary, there's a supreme constitution, there's a Bill of Rights. That is what political freedom is about. And the very basis for flourishing of any society is that it must be a free society. And as long as it's free, then there's always hope. It will self-correct. You have different directions. Countries go in different directions. And then democracy takes it. And sometimes democracy doesn't always get the best results. But ultimately what it means, as long as the society is free, it means it can self-correct and it can change. And that ultimately is where, as Jews, one has to live in a country where there is complete political freedom, which is the blessing. And that's part of what South Africa celebrates in these months of March and of April, the concept of human rights, of freedom, of a Bill of Rights and a democracy, and what that means. And the fact that it comes at this time of Pesach is important, because we take a moment to say we are indeed free citizens. And it's something which has influenced the way that I have conducted myself as Chief Rabbi over these years, because I've always felt it not only acceptable, but indeed my responsibility to challenge the government where necessary. If the government has come out with positions which are particularly anti-Israel over the years, I've challenged many presidents and cabinet ministers on that, and even more importantly is on issues of corruption in the years of state capture. I joined the civil society movement to remove Jacob Zuma from power. I changed the prayer in our shuls to stop praying for the president, which at the time was controversial, and it unsettled a lot of people, because how can you challenge a president? And my view has always been this: I don't want to live in a country where I need the goodwill of the government. If you need to be on the right side of the government, you're living in the wrong country. You need to live in a country where, irrespective of what you say about the government in private or in public, your rights will be protected as if you are one of their card-carrying members of the ruling party. That is the basis of freedom. And as long as there is freedom, then society can debate, can change, and there's flux. And that's what's happening now in South Africa. The ANC knows that its support has dipped below 50%. It knows that either it's going to have to drastically improve how it governs this country, or it will find itself in opposition. That is what freedom is about. That's what democracy is about. That is a gift. And on Pesach, we say, thank you, Hashem, because we were a nation enslaved. We had no rights. Hashem gave us liberty. And with that statement, God made a very important statement to the world, and that is, freedom is a gift from God. It is not something which a government grants. It is a gift from God. And that was the vision that inspired the founding fathers of the United States, the drafters of their constitution, which was the forerunner of all of the modern constitutional democracies. They were deeply religious men who were influenced by the Exodus, by the events of the Exodus. They understood freedom, they believed in it as a God-given value, and they enshrined it in the United States Constitution, which then influenced all of the modern Western democratic constitutions that flowed from it. And so on Pesach we say, thank you, Hashem, for our freedom. We give thanks, and that's on the most basic level. But that is the beginning stage of freedom. It's the entrance. It's the minimum entrance level to the concept of freedom. Freedom is something which is so much deeper, and you will find it in the words of the Haggadah. When we thank Hashem al Geulateinu, you will notice this at the end blessing, as the Seder comes to an end for the first part, just before the meal. It says al Geulateinu va'al pedut nafshenu, and for our redemption and for the liberation of our souls. Al pedut nafshenu, for the liberation of our souls. So why the double expression, redemption and the liberation of our souls? And in those words, the very succinct yet profound words of the Haggadah, is buried a very important idea, which is that freedom is not only about political rights, it is about the liberation of the soul. It is internal freedom. There is an external freedom, and when we talk about freedom, we love to talk about political freedom, because political freedom you can touch and feel and point and describe, and you could look at a statute book and you can look at a constitution. But spiritual freedom, freedom of the spirit, emotional freedom, psychological freedom, true internal liberation, that is not in the hands of any government or any circumstances. That is within our own domain, within our own spirit, within our own mind and heart and soul to determine. And therein lies the real challenge of Pesach. When we call Pesach Zman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom, it is not only a description, but it is a call to action. It's not only a description, it is a call to action. It is a call to live with freedom, freedom of the soul. Now, what does that mean? It means to throw off the shackles of all of the expectations and all of the social pressure and all of that which are values which are not core to the essence and the worth of life itself. All the things which distract us, which impose burden upon us. We need to free our soul, and the route to freeing our soul is, as the Mishnah Pirkei Avot says, the only person who is truly free is a person who involves themselves in Torah itself, because that is where we attain our deepest, innermost sense of freedom, freedom of the neshama, freedom of the soul, to be ourselves, because at the heart and essence of a human being is the neshama, is the soul, which is godly. It is B'Tselem Elokim. As the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Chaviva Adam Shenivra B'Tselem, beloved is the human being created in God's image, which means within every human being is something which is divine. The soul that God created has all of the elements of God himself. In fact, the Gemara in Brachot actually says that it compares the soul to Hashem. And it says in the same way that God cannot be seen, but yet he is there. The soul cannot be seen, and yet it is there. In the same way that God fills the universe, the soul fills the body. In the same way that God sustains the universe, the soul sustains the body. And one sees that when the soul leaves the body becomes lifeless, it becomes heavy, it loses its light, it loses its ability to move, and the face and the human face loses that glow, that sense of the presence of the neshama and the soul. If person has been there at the moment that the soul leaves the body, you will see the dramatic transformation of a human being, no matter how sickly and how frail, but carrying the neshama and the neshama carrying the person. And when that goes, then the body becomes lifeless. So God sustains the universe and the soul sustains the body. The soul is like Hashem. What God is to the universe, the soul is to the human being. And so if we want to be truly free, we need to connect with the soul. We need to be sure that we are in fact in harmony and in sync with the very essence of who we are. And when we become alienated from our inner core, that is when we impose burden on ourselves, because in fact what we are doing, we become distracted. We become burdened by things which are not core to the essence of who we are, the things which will not bring us inner peace and inner happiness. And so ultimately, and that's where, in a sense, although it began with the moment of jest, with the sense of contrast between the work of Pesach, contrasting it with the liberation and the freedom, actually, it is the very work of Pesach that is liberating. Part of the sense of the halacha that there's so much to do in preparation for Pesach is a reminder that freedom will not be attained on the tranquility of a desert island with no responsibilities and no duties and no work, but freedom will be attained through meaning and through purpose. And that goes to the very heart of the model for freedom that we have, which is Shabbat. Meaning, if we want to truly understand what freedom is about, we need to go to the essence of what Shabbos is. Because Shabbos introduces into the world an idea which is so counterintuitive, but relates deeply to this idea of freedom. It is so counterintuitive because Shabbos is called a day of rest. And yet it is not just a day of rest. And it's something which I have learned through the course of a journey, a personal journey that I've gone on with Shabbos, first through the Shabbos Project and now through writing this book about Shabbos. It's a journey in which I was led by Shabbos rather than leading Shabbos. It turned everything around, and I started to realize that there's something much more profound and deep about Shabbos than meets the eye. Because, and I recall when Gina and I were discussing the Shabbos Project 10 years ago in 2013 for the first time, and thinking, okay, we have this idea, let everyone keep one Shabbos together. And when we started talking to people about it, there was a lot of skepticism. How many people would do this? Would this really take hold? And I remember the discussions that we had. And I remember very clearly Gina saying to me, okay, you know what, if 10 people will keep that one Shabbos, it will be worth all of the effort. And then she said, and even if they don't, and we fail at it, this is such a noble thing to fail at. So let's just go for it. And then the response was so overwhelming and caught us both off guard that it exceeded every expectation beyond what one could even imagine, as this magnificent South African Jewish community embraced it. And from the warm embrace of South African Jewry that spread globally to where today there are thousands of Shabbos Project volunteers in more than 1,500 cities and 100 countries around the world. And what kept on bothering me was that if Shabbos is just a day of rest, how did so many people get excited about it? Because how do you get excited about a day of rest? The world has got a day of rest. There's Sunday. What's wrong with Sunday? And look, we shouldn't take for granted the fact that human civilization has struck upon the 7-day week. That was not always obvious, and there were different experiments that were done with that, and ultimately it came from our Shabbos, the concept of a 7-day week. But if Shabbos is just a day of rest, how would it captivate the imagination of the Jewish world in every corner of it? If Shabbos is just a day of rest, where would people become inspired to get involved and want to bring it to their communities and have this real deep connection? And so I began this journey to try and understand, which sounds like a strange thing to say. Why, as a rabbi, you'd think you know about Shabbos, right? That's what you learn in rabbi school, right? In yeshiva. That I knew the halachas of Shabbos. That those I'd learned cover to cover. I'd given shiurim on those. Could tell you everything that we can and can't do. But what is the heart and soul of it? What is the neshama? What is Shabbos really about? Then I started looking to try and find the answers to that. And so this book was born. Not in a way, I've written other books before, and normally the way the writing of a book works, for me in the past, it's been I've had ideas in my head, I need to get them on a piece of paper and or onto that screen, and it's a huge amount of effort to do that, and it's very daunting to look at a blank screen, but you just go ahead and just get the thoughts down and give your best to it. But over here, I didn't know what I wanted to put on paper. I just knew that there's something here in Shabbos that needs to be discovered. And so I started to go into it and looked up as many of the books that I could find. You'll find more than 200 books which are listed in the bibliography that was part of this journey to discover what our sages had said. And there's so much writing. And we are the inheritors of the most incredible tradition of learning over thousands of years, what the great sages and scholars discovered and uncovered and shared with the generations. What is Shabbos? And so the book became the journey to discover that for myself. And one of the things that I discovered was that Shabbos is not just a day of rest. Even though that by itself would be an incredible gift from Hashem to say thank you for giving us a day of rest, that would be a gift, but it's so much more than a day of rest. And that's why I decided, in fact, to call the book by a counterintuitive title as Shabbos as a day to create yourself. And you'd think that it can't be a day to create yourself. Shabbos, you're not meant to be creating. God stopped creating, so what a week. But what I discovered is that the concept of rest is so much more profound than ceasing activity, in the same way that the concept of true Torah freedom is so much more profound than being liberated from duty and burden. And rest is not about stopping activity, it is something which is much deeper. The Hebrew word for rest is menucha. And there's this moment at the beginning of creation, which I write about in the book. There's a moment in the beginning of creation after the 6 days of creation, and the verse says, Vayechal Elokim bayom hashvi'i, and God finished creating on the 7th day. And there the Midrash asks, what do you mean God finished creating on the 7th day? He finished creating on the 6th day. He didn't create anything on the 7th day. That was the whole purpose of it. And the Midrash says, no, he did. Because after 6 days, God said, what's missing from the world? Menucha. The concept of rest is missing from the world. And what he says is he compares it to, it's like having this incredible wedding hall which has been made a banqueting hall, and all the food is there and all of the decor is there, but the bride is not there. And who's the bride? Shabbos. So says Rav Elia Meir Bloch, that tells the Rosh Hashiva, he says, if Shabbos is a day where you just stop and you do nothing, and menucha means, rest means release from obligation, burden, and duty. If that is indeed what it means, then why would it be compared to a bride? How can God make that comparison? Because the bride is not an absence, she's a presence. It's saying that there was something missing from this world that was not an absence. And if you define rest as an absence of duty and responsibility, then menucha is defined by an absence of, not a presence of. And yet we see in the Midrash that it is a presence, which means there is something positive in it. And what Rav Elia Meir says, he says there are two kinds of rest. There is the rest of the pre-creation world, which is tohu vavohu, chaos and emptiness. That's all there was. There was nothing in the world. So you could say the world was at rest, it was peace because it was nothing. Or you can say there is a menucha which is positive. And he explains it as follows with the following analogy. And it goes to the very heart of the question, how do you attain inner peace in life? And he compares it to a river. If you've got this mighty river that is flowing down towards the sea, and the water is flowing and it's strong. And take a picture in your mind of the Crocodile River after the rainy season, and it's been a good rainy season, and it's flowing and it's strong. Then if you try to hold the water back and create tranquility from the water, all you end up doing is creating turbulence. Because the water needs to flow in its direction. It has to go in the direction and the purpose for which it was created. And if you try and make the water still, all that results from it is turbulence and tension. And he says, so too the human spirit. We were created in the image of God to connect with our Creator. We were created in the image of God to connect to the people around us. We were created in the image of God to do mitzvahs, positivity, to live lives of meaning and purpose and our divine mission. That is who we are. That is in our nature. And if we try to stop that and create artificial tranquility, the human spirit becomes restless. We will never find peace. The peace we find is the peace of that great river flowing towards the sea. That is the peace of the soul in its flowing towards its creator and in a life of meaning and purpose. That is the menucha of Shabbos. So when God said, what is the world missing menucha? What he meant was saying, we have a physical creation. We have a physical world. We have this world which is physically there, but what is its meaning and purpose? What is going to give it that sense of inspiration and connection? That is all of the values of Shabbos. Shabbos is not a day of emptiness. Shabbos is actually a day full of activities. There's shul, there's davening, there's 3 meals, there's singing. If you want to understand the difference between the Western concept of leisure and the Jewish concept of inner peace, then you just put Shabbos next to Sunday. Those are the two pictures of two different world views of what the nature of inner peace really looks like, and indeed what the nature of freedom looks like. Inner freedom, not political freedom. That is entrance level. We're talking about the sense of that inner freedom that makes a person feel, I am doing what I was born to do. I am living with purpose. I'm living with meaning. I can throw off the materialism, the expectations, the judgments of society because I am in touch with Hashem and with my neshama, and I feel pedut nafsheni, as we say in the Haggadah. Not only have we been redeemed, but we have freedom of the spirit, because God took us directly from Egypt all the way to Sinai to say, this is where the journey of freedom ends. Freedom doesn't end. It begins when you leave Egypt. It doesn't end there. That's why we start counting the Omer immediately from Pesach to link us to Shavuot, to say this was the beginning of freedom, not the end of freedom. True freedom is when we find meaning and purpose, and true inner peace is when we find meaning and purpose, and when we are sitting around the Shabbos table with family and friends, and there's words of Torah, and there is song, and there is thanksgiving, and there is true connection, and everybody is present, and there is holiness, and there is praise, and there is a sense of sanctity and purpose and meaning. That is when there is true peace in the home, and that is when we truly feel at rest. Because rest is not about the physical state that we're in. Rest is about that deep sense of inner peace, and that only comes from doing things which are meaningful and purposeful, and doing that which resonates with the depth of our soul. And that was part of what I discovered on this journey, which is why I called the book A Day to Create Yourself. Because creating yourself is about finding who you are and creating based on our character and our perspectives and happiness. The book is divided into those three sections on explaining how Shabbos gives us the tools to shape the kind of character that we want. What are the attributes, the character traits that we want? What is the perspectives? How do we look at the world? How does one look at the world through the eyes of Shabbos? And how does one find true happiness? And that was the journey that I went on through the book to try and discover and understand if Shabbos is just a day of rest, why is it so compelling? Why has it captivated the imagination of Jews around the world? And actually, it gives us the gateway into living with true inspiration, true meaning, and gives us the gateway to create the best version of ourselves, our families, our communities, our world. That is really what it is. And that's why the path to Pesach runs through Shabbos. And you may say, I'm saying that because I've just launched a book about Shabbos and we have this shir just before Pesach. I'm saying it because it's actually in the Ten Commandments, the Aseret HaDibrot. Because when the Aseret HaDibrot, in the Ten Commandments, when God reveals Shabbos, He gives two reasons for Shabbos. One, in one place, God says, keep Shabbos because I created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. And then in the Aseret HaDibrot, in the book of Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, God says, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekadsho, guard and preserve and protect this day to be holy because you were slaves in Egypt. Actually makes the immediate and direct connection. And you know it already from the Kiddush on Friday night, Zeichel Yetziat Mitzrayim. They are connected because the Exodus from Egypt is about freedom and Shabbos is about freedom. Freedom on a very basic level because on Shabbos everybody is equal. No matter what status a person comes from, whether they are an employer or an employee, no matter who a person is and where they come from, everybody is free on Shabbos. Nobody can be told what to do. But then on the deeper, more profound level, Shabbos is the gateway to true freedom, the spiritual freedom, the pedut nafshenu, that liberation of the internal part of who we are. That is indeed what Shabbos is about. So it is true to say that the pathway to Pesach lies through Shabbos, because without that connection, we can forget and think, no, Pesach maybe is just about political liberation. Pesach is not about political liberation only. It is about the freedom of the soul, and that is in our hands. God could give us the political freedom, but now we have to give ourselves the spiritual freedom. That's why I said that Zman Cherutenu is the time of our freedom, is not a description only, it is a call to action. Make ourselves free. The only person who is free is a person who involves themselves with Torah. That means we can make ourselves free. But then we have to believe that that freedom is truly in our hands. And how we choose to live our lives is an expression of that freedom, and how we choose to spend our time. If the Sforno says that the greatest expression of freedom is allocation of time, then one of the first things we can think about to determine whether we are truly free is how do we allocate our time. That is a reflection of our values. Time management is not a technical skill, it is an expression of our values and what is most important and precious. Do we make time to learn Torah? Do we make time for our families? Do we make time for chesed? Do we make time for community? Do we make time for mitzvahs? That how we choose to allocate our most precious resource, time, which is more precious than anything else, because every other resource we have is renewable except time. It is given, it is limited, it is the thing that we should guard most preciously. It is much more precious than money. And sometimes you find people who are so stingy to part with their money and yet so generous with their time. And I often wondered to myself, how can that be? You're giving away your most precious resource, and the one which is renewable and the one which is really just part of this physical material world that you hold on to. And time is life itself. It is the most precious and important thing. And therefore, time is intertwined with Pesach. Because we left bechipazon, in haste, with speed. The matzahs have to be baked with speed as a reminder that every minute is precious, because 1 minute is the difference between the mitzvah of matzah and the aveira of chometz. 1 minute is the difference between the mitzvah of matzah and the aveira of chometz. That's all that it is. Every single minute and every single second is indeed precious, and that we learn also, because ultimately, what is Shabbos if not a mitzvah of time? It is the holiness of time. What is time? Time is intangible. It is, you can sanctify a place, a shul, a temple, the land of Israel. These are physical places with physical holiness. But time you can't touch, you can't feel. It is something which is spiritual, and yet it is so real. That moment when the sun sets on a Friday afternoon, 1 moment before sunset, it is Friday afternoon. The next moment, it is Shabbos Kodesh. It is the holiness of Shabbat. And so it is indeed a mitzvah of time, because time is the gateway to freedom. Time is the gateway to meaning. Time is the gateway to how we choose to live our lives in the most profound way. So I want to take the opportunity to wish everybody Chag Kosher V'Sameach. May this indeed be a festival of liberation, where we give thanks to Hashem that we are free. But let us understand that it is a call to action, that the political freedom, that is a gift which is given to us. The spiritual freedom, that is our legacy. Thank you so much. I want to thank Rabbi Landau and the Shul for arranging the very gracious, generous gift of the book to everybody who attended tonight. And I'm happy to sign copies before you leave. And also what I wanted to suggest is, as you see the book, most chapters on average are about 5 minutes long to read. The reason I'm saying all of that is because I think there's an opportunity to start learning groups with it. So what I would like to suggest to each one of you, have a look through the book. It's a gift from the Shul, which very kindly have sponsored the books. And by the way, all the proceeds of the book are going into the Shabbos project. I feel that Shabbos is too holy to make money off Shabbos, so that's going straight to the Shabbos project. And the final word on this that I wanted to say is that you'll see at the beginning, at the end of the book, there's a quote from the Gemara that says, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Matana tova yesh li beveis k'nazai, I have a precious gift in my treasure house, Shabbat Shema, and its name is Shabbos. And then he says, Va'ani rotze litna li Yisrael, I want to give it to the Jewish people. Leich v'hodiyam, go and tell them about the gift. And that has been my mission in the Shabbos project and writing this book, to go share the gift with as many Jews as possible. I'm saying to you, be my partners in that. You know, we in this room have that gift of Shabbos, but now we've got to go share that with everybody, because it's something which is so special and precious. So take the book, be my partner, and let's spread this message to the world. Thank you so much.